Okay, today I'm going to install the new Mober CPU power supply unit for my Linn Sondek LP12 and also the SSP12 in a platter for the Linn Sondek. If we just look at the components, the SSP component, you can see the brass inner ring, you can see the bearing surface, so the spindle with the bearing, and if you have a look carefully at the top you'll see there's a ball bearing embedded into the tip of the shaft. For the Mober PSU, you'll see there's a high quality DC motor, that's a Maxtor, a Swiss motor. There's the control unit, there is the stripes that the optical sensor will pick up to actually measure the speed of the turntable. There's a connection cable, and in this little box there's the optical sensor and some bits and pieces. So let's go and get the turntable now and start looking at it and then disassembling it. Okay, this is my LP12, so let's start pulling the cover and the platter off the turntable. Putting it aside. And then removing the belt from the motor. Again, putting that aside. And then removing the inner platter from the bearing. There we go. Reading the instructions, we have to remove the old AC motor. To do that, you undo the bottom cover. There are 4 feet that you unscrew, and then the bottom cover will just come off. If we just have a quick look underneath the turntable, you can see the motor up the top there. There are 2 screws holding it from the top. Here you can see that I've got the Valhalla power supply. This will be replaced. So that can actually, I'll just disconnect the power connections, but that can actually be removed. I think I'll just leave that in there, but I'll just remove the power cable from it. Okay, so let's do that. So let's just grab a screwdriver and let's undo the screws. These screws also act to level the motor. And this one here. And I believe if I remove it completely, the motor should become loose, and hopefully it will just, yes, I'll just see if I can get the motor out. Oh, actually I think these little screws need to come out too. Let me just find a driver for them. Okay, it looks like these screws holding on the motor are 2mm hexagonal screws. So let's gently remove that. And I can hold the motor in from the underside. Yes, that's coming free now. One, and it looks like there's a little nut on the underside, and let's do that one. There we go. Yes, now the motor is free. remove the motor from the turntable. Okay. So here's the motor. It's an AC motor. I will need to disconnect this from the power supply. The first thing I'll do is just take a photograph of the arrangement of the wires in case I ever have to replace this again. Okay, this is the underside of the turntable. You can see I've removed the power supply connections from this terminal block and the Valhalla power supply, and I've removed the motor. So this is the motor and the wires. There's a blue, red and 2 grey wires. I don't know whether the orientation of the grey wires is relevant, but I did mark where they went into the terminal block. Also, I took photographs of the wires for both the power supply and for the motor. So all that remains is to snip. Unfortunately, the ground wire is soldered onto the ground point of the turntable, so I'm just going to snip this wire so that if I ever were to replace it, I would just solder it back up again. There we go. Now the power supply cable, the power cable is removed. If you have a look here, you'll see there's this is where the phono signals go through the chassis, and here's where the power supply goes. I will take the new power supply cables that go to the motor directly from here. So let's now put the motor, let's put the new DC motor into the power supply, into the turntable. Okay, I've taken off the guide. As you can see, I've also taken off the motor. I had to do that in order to be able to get underneath, to get the screws to take the belt guide off. So with the belt guide off, the optical sensor goes into one of the height adjustment posts screw holes, and there's a locking pin that holds, that's using one of the screw holes for the belt guide. So this just goes on and we just tighten that. So now what I can do is put the motor back on, like so. This goes underneath like this. Here. Now we'll take the other screw. Again, I'll try and ensure that the spindle is in the middle of the hole, that it's not touching the optical sensor, and then tighten up the screws to medium tight. And similarly over here. Okay, that looks good. Now we have to get the cable and route the appropriate wires through. You can see that we have this connector, connects up to the motor, and these connect up to the optical sensor block here. So we need to go through the turntable, through one of the mounting screw holes. Okay, here we have the optical sensor for the tachometer connected. You can see the wires go through one of the holes where the belt guide went through. You can see that it's actually fairly close to the spindle, but there is actually a gap there, and you can see I connected into the terminal block. Underneath, you see this is the cable that is supplied with an XR connector that goes to the actual power supply. This cable here actually connects to the motor cable here. So all that we need to do is to ensure that we route the cables nicely, and that we clamp this cable through the power where originally the power cable exited the turntable. Okay, this is what the cable looks now, and the key on the back of the turntable. If we have a look underneath, we can see the motor, we can see the optical sensor signal wires, and we can see the motor drive wire and the cable clamp. And I put in a little zip tie here just to hold them together, so that when I put the base on, there's no chance of them being pinched. You can see the Valhalla power supply I've left in is just disconnected now. Now we have to place the actual tachometer wheel on, stick it onto the inside of the platter. So the first thing to do is just to make sure that we're free from dust on the inside of the platter. And then gently remove the center section of the tachometer wheel. Like so. You can see that we've actually got two, I guess, just in case something goes wrong. But the idea is to actually stick this in like so. So this needs to, you can see that it rides just a few millimeters in from the edge. So the idea is to pull off the backing in one spot. Like so. And make sure that it looks aligned, and gently pull the backing off. So now we need to reassemble the turntable. You can see I've got the power supply unit connected to power and the cable to the turntable. Now I need to put in the SSP12 into the bearing. This is done carefully. This will just fit. Like so. Now put the belt on. Now let's plug in the power supply and see if this thing powers up. Turn it on. Okay. Okay. We can see that it's showing that the target is 33, but we've got no RPM. So now I need to put the platter on. Like so. Here we go. So you can see on the display that the RPM is increasing, and now it's running at 33.23. Just wait for it to equalize. Okay, here is everything connected up with the amplifier, the PSU and the turntable, and I can confirm that it sounds very good. A little bit more open, the noise floor seems lower, and it's just beautiful. I'm very pleased, and it was quite a straightforward install if you take your time and take a little bit of care.